One day in 2009, someone entered the office of Vito Rizzuto, one of the most powerful mafiosos in the world. He was the boss of the Bonanno crime family, one of the 5 great American mafia families. But this wasn't just any day. This was the day that he and his family would be indicted by the FBI for racketeering and extortion. He was so sure he'd get acquitted that he smiled at the cameras. It was the smile that broke the camel's back. Vito Rizzuto was arrested soon after, but it didn't take long for him to get bail and return home. His smile was seen as an insult by many people, including his own underbosses. When the trial started, the judge warned everyone not to take their emotions over, but we all know how it went. One of the underbosses, Anthony Legato, took the stand and testified against his own boss. What made things worse was that Anthony had recorded his conversations with Vito, which were used as evidence. This betrayal didn't end well for Vito. Not only did he lose the case and get sentenced to 11 years in prison, but he also got whacked in prison. Nobody knows who ordered the hit or if it was a revenge killing. Dud. But what we do know is that Vito had made a lot of enemies over the years. Vito's story is interesting because he wasn't your average mafioso. In fact, he became the boss of the Bonanno crime family without ever setting foot in prison. That's why they call him Teflon Vito. In today's episode, we'll tell you how he amassed a huge fortune. That's why he was hated by both the government and the other mob bosses. And finally, how he got killed inside prison. Black Hand coming. Vito came from a poor immigrant family. His father was born in Italy and immigrated to America in the early 20th century. His mother was born in America to immigrant parents. So when Vito was born on February 15, 1936, he was already a third-generation American. This meant that unlike other mafiosos, Vito wasn't trying to preserve an Italian heritage. In fact, he grew up hating his father for abandoning the family and leaving them penniless. You see, Vito's father was a soldier in the infamous Genovese crime family, but he got caught by the cops and turned into a witness protection program. When he entered the program, he changed his name to Louis and cut off all ties with his old life. He then moved to Cleveland and started a new family with Carmela, but he never told her about his past. When Vito was born, he raised him as a good little boy and taught him the value of hard work and education. But as you can imagine, it was difficult to live honestly. When your husband has mafia connections. When Vito was 9 years old, his father was killed outside his house. The murderer was never found, and nobody knew why he was killed. Some thought it was a mistake and he was just killed because he looked like Louis. Others thought it was an inside job and someone from the witness protection program wanted to scare the family away and force them to move somewhere else. Whatever the truth was, Vito's mother was terrified and decided to move to Brooklyn and live with her sister. She then told Vito's uncles to keep an eye on her brother-in-law and make sure he doesn't get hurt. Sadly, it didn't take long for the murders to follow the family in Brooklyn. When Vito was 14, one of his mother's cousins, John Gotti, was shot dead in front of his wife and kids. Again, nobody knows who did it, but many believe it was the same guy who killed his father. At this point, Vito's mother couldn't take it anymore and told her brother to leave Brooklyn and start a new life. So at age 14, Vito and his family left New York and moved to Cleveland. They lived with his aunt and uncle until Vito finished high school, and they moved back to New York where Vito enrolled in college. Unlike other mobsters, Vito never got involved with drugs, gambling, or violent crimes. Instead, he focused on legitimate businesses and built a small fortune. He opened construction sites, restaurants, bars, and nightclubs, and invested in real estate. And whenever he had a business deal with a non-Italian, he always made sure to have a go-to guy watching his back. That's how Vito became one of the richest men in New York without ever being suspected by the police. But even though he was successful in business, Vito never forgot about his family's humble beginnings. He was very generous with his money and often gave thousands of dollars to random people he met on the street. He was also very loyal to his friends and relatives and would do anything to protect them. He was known for having a short fuse and would often get into fights with people who disrespected him. But he was also very charismatic and charming and could easily win people over to his side. As Vito's wealth grew, so did his influence in the mafia. He became close to the heads of the other 4 families and was often invited to their secret meetings. He was also very careful not to draw attention to himself and avoided the media at all costs. So careful, in fact, that the FBI didn't even know he was a mafia boss. The first time they learned about him was in the 1980s, when they intercepted a conversation between 2 mobsters. They were talking about a construction project in Manhattan and mentioned a mysterious businessman named Vito Rizzuto. The FBI couldn't figure out who he was at first, but eventually discovered his true identity. They then launched a massive investigation into his activities and were shocked by what they found. They discovered that Vito was running a massive racketeering scheme in which he extorted millions of dollars from construction companies. He also had ties to the Russian mafia and was helping them smuggle drugs into the country. To top it all off, he was also involved in several murders. The FBI was furious and wanted to arrest Vito, but they needed concrete evidence. They had been watching him for months, but Vito was too careful. He never made any mistakes, and always seemed to be one step ahead of them. Just when they thought they had him cornered, he would disappear, and they wouldn't see him for weeks or even months. It was like he was a ghost. But eventually the FBI got lucky. In 1994, one of Vito's associates was arrested with a large sum of cash. When the cops searched his house, they found a ledger with the names of several mobsters, including Vito's. They also found several weapons, including 2 grenades. This was the evidence the FBI needed to arrest Vito. They knew he was dangerous, but they were confident. They had him outnumbered. On April 15, 1994, hundreds of FBI agents and cops raided Vito's house and arrested him. They also arrested several of his associates and charged them with racketeering, extortion, and murder. Vito was stunned. He had no idea the FBI was onto him and had never been arrested before. He was released on bail and put under house arrest while awaiting trial. But the judge soon revoked his bail after he was caught trying to bribe a witness. Vito was now desperate. He knew he was facing life in prison and tried everything to avoid it. He offered to testify against the other mobsters, hoping the judge would go easy on him, but the judge wasn't interested and refused to accept his offer. On October 25, 1994, Vito was sentenced to 30 years in prison. He was devastated and knew he would never see his family again. He spent the next few years in solitary confinement, but was eventually transferred to a regular prison. There he became friends with several inmates and even started a business selling cigarettes and snacks. But not everyone was happy about his success. In 2004, one of his fellow inmates, Michael Francesi, was arrested for trying to hire a hitman to kill Vito. The hitman turned out to be an undercover cop, and Francesi was sentenced to 10 years in prison. But the plot didn't end there. In 2009, another inmate, Ernest Wallace, confessed to killing Francesi in prison. Wallace claimed he was paid $75,000 to kill Francesi by a mysterious person in the Gambino crime family. This was the first time the Gambino crime family had been linked to an attack on Vito, and it was clear that someone wanted him dead. But despite all the danger, Vito never backed down, continued to sell cigarettes and snacks in prison, and even started a catering business. He was determined to make the best of his situation and not let the prison break him. But his luck would eventually run out. On December 10, 2011, Vito was found unresponsive in his cell. He was rushed to the hospital, but was pronounced dead on arrival. The cause of death was blunt impact injuries, meaning he had been beaten to death. The killer was never found, but it didn't take long for rumors to spread. Some said it was revenge for Francesi's death, while others said it was a hit ordered by the Gambino crime family. But the truth may never be known. All we know is that Vito Rizzuto, the Teflon Don, was finally taken down.